So as we go through the fourth chapter of Ketubot, we're focused on the boundary point, the point at which the responsibilities of a father to his daughter cease and the responsibilities of the husband begin. And of course, that's a turning point for the whole tractate of Ketubot, because once the responsibilities of the husband start, they are defined in the Ketubah. So via this transition point, the transition point between the father and the husband, we can enter the whole question of the text of the Ketubah and the rights and the obligations in the Ketubah. And we'll see this change of subject as we move through the fourth chapter to its end. But here in the fifth Mishnah, we're actually at the turning point where we define the transition from father to husband. And the Mishnah says, Le'olam hi birushuta av ad shetikanes lachupa. She remains in the domain of her father until she enters the chuppah. In other words, going under the chuppah is the defining point at which responsibilities shift. Masar av lishluchei haba, harehi birushut haba. If the father delivered her or passed her to the agents of the husband. So we got a geographical distance here. We're very used today to the parents of the bride and the groom meeting at the chuppah. But if there's some distance, then they won't meet. So the husband might send out messengers, the husband might send out messengers to pick up his bride. So the messengers will come out and they'll collect the bride from her father's house and then bring her back to the chuppah. And the Mishnah says, in this situation, if she's handed over to the agents of the husband, harehi birshut haba, she transitions she becomes the responsibility of the husband before she goes under the chuppah, actually, from the point that she's handed over to the agents. If the emissaries of the father, apologies for the translation on the source sheet, if the emissaries of the father went with the emissaries of the husband, so in other words, the father sends some messengers to, I guess, accompany his daughter to the chuppah. Harehi b'reshutav. She's still in the domain of her father. In other words, the handover is not complete. If the father sends messengers with her, the handover is not complete until she actually gets under the chuppah. Masru shluchei avli shluchei haba. If the father's agents actually handed her over to the agents of the husband, harehi b'reshut haba, she's then in the domain of the husband. Now, the Mishnah is then going to go on to say what happens while she's in the domain of the father. And it makes a surprising point. So we're looking back now to before she's handed over. Ha'av eino chayav bi mezonot bito. A father is not obliged to maintain his daughter. And we find this an extraordinary statement, by the way. And the Mishnah is going to go on to say, Zeh midrash derash Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah made this drush. Lifnei chachamim b'kerem b'yavnei. Habanim yirashu ve'habanot yizonu. There's a saying, apparently, the sons shall inherit and the daughters shall be maintained. And this saying seems to be from the Mishnah. At least it doesn't appear. The commentators say it appears in the Ketubah, but it's not in the Ketubah text we have today. It does appear in the Mishnah, by the way, in Bava Batra. There's a Mishnah in Bava Batra. Look, it's on the source sheet. Mishemet v'hiniach banim vanot. Someone died and left sons and daughters. Bizman she'anechasim merubim habanim yirshu ve'habanot yizonu. That's our saying. Habanim yirashu ve'habanot yizonu. If the property is great, the sons inherit and the daughters receive maintenance. In other words, after the death of the father, the estate is burdened with the upkeep of the daughters. And then once the daughters are taken care of, the sons inherit the rest. And then the Mishnah goes on to say, if the property was small, if the property is small, the daughters actually receive the maintenance, and the sons have to go begging from door to door. In other words, the daughter's maintenance takes precedence over the son's inheritance. The daughters have a prior claim on the estate. So let's go back to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He's going to drush this statement now. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, in front of the sages in the vineyard of Yavne, he quotes this saying, Habanim yerashuvi, habanot yizonu. The sons inherit and the daughters shall be maintained. This is from the estate. Ma habanim einan yorshin eila achar mitat avihem. Just as the sons only inherit after the death of the father, so the daughters, af habanot lo yizonu eila achar mitat avihem. So the daughters aren't maintained except after the death of their father. It's a really interesting drush. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying, look, all this stuff only happens after death. So what happens before death? And I can imagine that we all have a problem with this idea that a father isn't obligated, isn't obliged to support his daughters. And the Gemara has a problem with it too, but we're in the Mishnah, so I'm just going to bring you the Rambam, the Maimonides, in his commentary on the Mishnah, and he's really taking from the Gemara. And he says, I've shortened his commentary a little bit, but he says, Yesh, there are rules about this, which I'm going to explain. And then he goes on. I'm going to explain. And this is that a person is obliged to support his children until the age of 6, until they get to 6. And whether he wants to or whether he doesn't want to. And actually they force him to do so, whether he's poor or rich. Bein shehu ashir or ani. So he has no choice about it. And even if he's a pauper, they force him to maintain his children. And after this age, if he doesn't want to support them, the judge should force him with words. And the Rambam goes on to explain at length, actually, in his commentary, that the judge is essentially embarrassed this father to the point that he's willing to support his children. Actually, this is his daughters and his sons. So the Talmud seems to have a problem with this drush, but it doesn't, if you like, replace the drush. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's words stand. That from a pure legal point of view, he's not obliged to maintain his daughter. What about the other way round? So what about the other way around? So now we're going to, we're going to see what happens if the husband doesn't fulfill his responsibilities. And we're going to begin with not writing a ketubah. Lo chatavla ketubah. If he didn't write a ketubah for her, this is now the husband, not the father. Betula gova matay ve'almana maneh shehu t'nai beit din. If he didn't write a ketubah for her, a virgin gets 200 zuz and a widow 1 maneh, that's 100 zuz, because it's a condition laid down by the court. In other words, there are certain standards in terms of arranging a marriage, and the basic sum of the ketubah is one of those standards. It's like common law. Even if it's not written down in the ketubah, the wife can still collect it on the death of her husband or on her divorce. Doesn't make any difference. Maybe he assigned to her in writing a field that was worth 1 maneh, in other words, 100 zuz, instead of the 200 zuz. So he did write a ketubah, but he's got the wrong amount in it. And he didn't write, Lo kasavla, kol nechasim de itayim, li achrayin li ktubatayich. He didn't write, all the property that I possess is mortgaged for your ketubah. He didn't write that. Nevertheless, doesn't make any difference. He's liable. Chayav. He's liable for the full 200 zuz. Shehu Tanai Bet Din, because it's a condition of the Bet Din. And as we carry on through this fourth chapter, we'll just see a number of other examples of obligations which the husband has to take on with regard to his wife, whether or not they're written in the ketubah.